Hello, Mr. Walker. Chapter 8 is compensation, which of course has such great weight in my position since 75 to 85% of the budget will revolve around compensation for employees, and it'll have the most weight in almost all decision making. Um, Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it runs well enough and our resources are such that it doesn't have to have that much weight, but I do know that it will always have an influence on everything we hope to do. Uh, the chapter begins with just discussing the psychology of human nature and how satisfying our needs seems to lead us to almost all human action. I got to say, I hope that's not true. I'm a believer in Maslow's hierarchy and that self-actualization at the top of that pyramid means that just trying to reach potential every day and doing the best you can should be our goal. Um, Although I know that in this capitalistic world that we live in, the baubles and the toys that we can get and the status that we have does have a lot to do with how we react to things. I fight against that every day, to tell you the truth, as an educator and as an idealist. But I do know that there is great motivation in compensation. Compensation, I think, does match the base side of human nuance, and linking compensation to the district mission and goals and objectives is absolutely imperative. There's 5 variables for compensation: performance, effort, seniority, skill, and job requirements. Each one of those, I believe, is a little maddening to try to quantify, hence the salary schedule, I guess. Performance really should be primary, but you know as well as I, in school districts, that's not the case. Teachers are going to be treated equally according to experience and to education for the most part, and then they're going to be allowed to remain in that position and can look ahead, but are not going to be ranked for merit for the most part, even should their particular position be one that's more sought after, like a science teacher or a special education teacher. We do in our contract have the right to offer bonuses, one-time bonuses. So I guess there is a bit of merit in the selection and perhaps the performance that you might be able to provide. But right now in Carroll, again, basically, if you stay here long enough and if you advance to the highest degree, then you're going to get paid the most. And that's how most schools are. So even though the book does mention quite often that performance should be the primary driver for compensation, not always true. Now, there may be fringe things that you can offer that are associated with performance or effort, and I'm going to always continue to look for those areas. But again, my hope is, and most teachers, and you know that this cliched saying goes along with it, that teachers don't get into the business for the money, they get in because of the duty and the service they'll provide to children. I hope that really is true because the money is not going to be something I think that's going to provide great incentive for performance. Um, these particular compensatory ideas should include intrinsic and extrinsic compensation. They define intrinsic as professional sorts of advancement. Uh, I don't agree with that definition completely, although I see why they're categorizing it that way. And then the extrinsic as direct and indirect things like salary and benefits. Um, Professional advancement and titles and parking spaces, I still think all of those things are actually extrinsic. Intrinsic to me, again, means what I mentioned at the outset, that you're just doing the right thing because you're reaching potential to try to serve others, and it's basically altruistic. But I understand what they're saying in the chapter. Does money motivate? They say yes in this chapter. I would say that for a majority of professionals and workers in our country, I think that is the case, where the job is the job and money motivates them to go, and perhaps they have performance objectives that are quantifiable that they can reach. However, in education, again, it's maddening to try to track those things down, and to provide performance pay is really, really difficult. So in education, I think we have kind of a completely different system, and I'm not sure money is the motivation. It might make us go to work and make sure that we can live comfortably, but as far as getting ahead, there's really no way to do that other than advancement up the ladder into leadership positions. Other issues to consider about compensation. Public disclosure, that every teacher is going to have their salary put in the newspaper, packaging, equity, and we already discussed that back a couple other chapters. Comparative data to community and other wages of other schools and other states happens frequently, comes out every year. Which state has the highest compensation for teachers, which state has the lowest. I happen to have lived in the state that had the lowest and still does for 42 years now, I believe, in a row. South Dakota was last in the country in teacher compensation. They did improve that 2.5 years ago. However, still falling behind Mississippi and North Dakota. Board recommendations, deductions of pay, and those would have to do with unions in particular, pay periods, wage review, and the salary schedule itself, which I find they probably didn't spend enough time on in this chapter because the salary schedule is incredibly important. Fringe benefits can be attractive, help to retain. Here in Carroll, the insurance is absolutely one of the best in the state, and I think that's, again, one of the reasons that we do have long tenured staff. And then the legal bounds of Social Security, workers' comp, and state retirement systems, and COBRA, should we have separation. There's voluntary things as well, insurance, which I mentioned already, and time off, dental, health, optical, life. The leaves, which many, I think, teachers just see as and take for granted as part of who they are really fringe benefits and need to be probably many times pointed out as such. Sick leave, vacation, personal leave, holidays, even sabbaticals, conventions and workshops that are paid for, and professional leaves. I've only worked in education mainly, so I don't know the situations in others. I do think that teachers are treated okay in this way, in particular because their holidays match their children's holidays and their family's holidays. So I think that's pretty good. But I also know that professionally, I'm not quite sure teachers are treated the same as other professions. Healthcare is going to continue to be an issue. Managed healthcare and looking for alternative ways to keep those costs down are important. Obamacare, whatever you may think of it, I believe in some ways it probably was a benefit and a bonus to teachers. I guess we'll see, and the jury's still out. The changes that were made in this last year will change some of those things. Workers' comp can be a real burden, and there's environmental risks and violence and diseases. They suggest in the book, like they had in the past, that there be a risk manager. That's probably going to be me, because in the end, I'll be the one who takes care of risks and crisis for our schools. Fringe benefits continue to be a good part of the consistency, and I think they need to be reviewed yearly and see what the cost analysis is, and whether they can be attractive and keep costs down, and then improve wages within the resources that we have. They don't speak, very much in the book about, in fact, at all, I don't think, of the demographics of school, and those would be age-related, family-related, the location, the geography of the school. Those things influence compensation a lot. And then, of course, the politics in the state of how schools are funded themselves really influence a lot of the things that they refer to. And so some of those things are completely out of our hands. And, a 1% increase this year meant that there was going to be a difficulty in many increases across the board at Carroll School and all schools in Iowa. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of this particular YouTube, since around 80% of the budget is going to be devoted to faculty and personnel, this is a big area, and compensation is going to continue to be a big area, and also going to have to fight external factors to make sure that we can reward people adequately. Otherwise, what you have in our system is that people will leave for other districts in our state that perhaps have an easier way or to reward or have a higher compensation level for whatever reason, because maybe they've went outside the normal taxing structure and been able to ask their patrons for more money and been able to devote that to the schools. This year have had one instance where a smaller school that's fairly close to us is able to offer more money, at least at the outset, because they like to attract teachers. So their salary schedule is heavy at the beginning. Ours is much heavier at the end because we have a greater population at the end. So the Education Association has asked to continue to add on so that teachers can make more money as they get longer tenures. So we lost a teacher, even though I could point out that, 5 or 6 years from now, they actually would be making more money. They were looking at the present and decided not to take a position here. So those things are going to continually come up. It's too bad that we have to compete that way amongst our schools, because my feeling is we educate all kids and we're all in this together. But there's going to continue to be certain competition, just because of this, even for enrollment, because every one of those kids adds to the coffers, and then you have the allowance of being able to perhaps add the teacher salary as your population goes up. So lots of those factors that are not discussed, but I did very much appreciate the outline, and some of the things that were mentioned here. Again, gave me some consciousness to things I'm going to have to deal with. Thanks again, Mr. Walker. I'll load this one up and send it to you soon.